Good morning. This is the Ordinance and Policy Committee. Present this morning are Councilman Clunt and Councilman Schramm, City Finance Officer Chandra Phillips, myself, and City Attorney Paul Jensen. Today's date on this committee, just to mark it, is Wednesday, June 14th. And it looks like we will be considering proposed ordinance 1054 and 1055. Mr. Jensen, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 1054, I had passed this out to council at the conclusion of our previous meeting, asking you to please take a look at it if you wanted an opportunity to come in on the ground floor and as we prepare to push this forward. This stems from, and we all know that there have been some issues come up, whether it was in the form of people that were acting as vendors in certain vendor fair type activities and things like that. When all of this started, our finance officer had looked around at several communities that had very similar programs to ours and looked at what they had for their ordinances. And what you see in front of you came from one of those communities to start with, although I have now gone through it in the last week and put my original edits into play here. And so if we can, I just kind of walk us through very quickly here on 1054 and give you the quick tour of it to see if you folks see anything that you want to address or move forward or not move forward, whatever your thoughts are as council. So first of all, we really needed to define some of the things that were involved in this, because we knew that we had peddlers involved in this, and we knew that we had some merchants involved in it, and yet as we look at the definitions, we come to understand that we've been dealing with more than just that. A peddler or a solicitor obviously is somebody going from place to place for the purpose of selling or soliciting the sale of goods or services. Compare that to the term of a transient merchant, and this is the classic example of a transient merchant is somebody that maybe is even from the local area here and might even have a brick and mortar store, and yet they moved part or all of their operation temporarily to a traveling type of location, whether it's a vendor fair or arts in the park kind of deal or things like that. People that are generally known here, and we'll get to the reasons why this distinction, but we'll come back to that. The last one that we wanted to talk about, and it really belongs in this same chapter, and that is to talk about mobile food vendors. There are some that come already in Winter, South Dakota, and there's no reason to indicate that that's going to change, other than it may even become more frequent from time to time. Section 2 basically just requires that these folks that fall within this category get a permit. There's no cost monetarily to them to get the permit, but what it does is it allows us to establish the ground rules and to make them responsible to comply with the ground rules by getting the permit, providing their identifying and other information to whether it's our chief of police or to our finance officer, in order for us to be able to verify things to the extent we need to, and then go ahead and issue them a permit. Section 3 talks about nuisances, and this is a classic example of what constitutes a nuisance in the context of these transients or peddlers, things like that. Number one, it's a nuisance if they show up at a place where there's a sign up that says you're not welcome here, and they go ahead and come on in and knock on the door and whatnot. That's a nuisance. Number two, it's a nuisance if they if they show up at a place and the property owner or the person in charge of the property makes a request that they leave and they refuse. If you're asked to leave, you refuse to leave, that's a nuisance, you're in violation. It's a nuisance and you're in violation if you provide false information to the city when you're applying for and we're getting ready to issue a permit, things like that for you. The other requirement here is that as people who have applied for and received the permit, when they're conducting their business under that permit, they need to openly display the permit at all times. Section 4, and this contains some things that I know we've discussed to a certain extent in the past. Yes, sir.
In section 3, though, it doesn't say about lying to the city. It says if you lie to the consumer.
To the consumer, thank you, yes, yes.
So they can say anything they want to the city, and I don't know.
No,
In section 2, it addresses.
Section 2 addresses the
it
city.
does, yeah, and
The-
thank you.
Okay,
No, but I appreciate you pointing that out, because I had intended to, so.
okay.
So,
Yeah,
but you're,
that's if they lie to the person they're talking to
if
at
they
their
do,
house. Yep.
correct.
This vacuum cleaner will suck up everything. Yep,
Or it'll work and maybe it doesn't.
yep,
So, yeah, you're exactly right.
okay.
Under section 4, it talks about the types of activities that are exempt from the requirements of this chapter. And our favorite one is on letter A, which is the charitable, educational, and religious organizations. Classic example, Girl Scouts selling Girl Scout cookies. That's my favorite, but of course, you can have the Boy Scouts out doing their things. You can have the FFA kids out selling their things. All of those are going to be exempt from requirements under this chapter. Item B, we always have people, especially coming up now in the later part of the summer, that are going to be parked along the highway selling goods out of the back of their pickup that they've grown there on their own farm, ranch, home garden, things like that. So that's going to be exempt under this provision. Traveling salespersons that deal with retail merchants, manufacturers, jobbers, et cetera. In other words, these are the people that are not coming in to go house to house, door to door, or to sit on the street corner and try to make contact. This is your folks that are, my favorite example would be the wrench salesman that goes to all the body shops and the mechanic shops and things like that and sells wrenches. And on D, the other favorite of the city of Winter is that the bona fide garage sales. They can have them no more than 4 times a year, no more than 4 days each time, and that word bona fide actually has meaning. The law says that means it's for real what you say it is, and not some subterfuge or cover to do something else. Section 5 talks about getting the application for the transient merchant permit. Recall, this is for the person that we kind of know who they are. They might even be from this, the city or this general area, but they're generally known who they are. They come and they do this stuff, whether it's every year or several times a year or whatever. They're the ones that will make application to the city finance officer. There's the information there that they need to provide, and then as long as they provide that, then the city finance officer can issue that. Section 6 talks about the other folks that fall within this general category, but they are the peddlers, the solicitors, or the mobile food vendors. Those folks are going to take their application to the chief of police, who has the tools and the ability to do any checking if he needs to, check the background, whether it's these folks, we know they came from such and such a location, last there, let's find out if they're having any problems, if they caused any problems, if they were legitimate operation down there, and that's going to help. All of those folks would apply through the chief of police. The type of information that they're required to provide, again, is very similar. The main thing is that it has to be accurate, can't be fraudulent information, and it can't be misleading information. The duration, and one of the things that people will talk about when they apply for their permit is, how long do you need this for? And they literally will put a ending date on their permit when it's issued. And so the duration is going to last until 8:00 p.m. on the date of expiration. In any event, if somebody forgets to put an expiration, or if these are people that frankly do this off and on throughout the year, every year, all year long, on weekends or whatever, they can go up to a full year, but that's the maximum. And every year they would have to renew. The other thing this does, and you'll notice that we've provided our finance officer and our chief of police some time in which to get a permit issued if they need it. They've got up to 5 days when somebody applies for a permit. Now, most of the time, it's probably going to be somebody they've dealt with before. They're going to know these folks and probably be able to gather the information and issue it fairly quickly. But if they need time to do some checking or whatever, our ordinance will provide them with the opportunity to do that. Take up to 5 days before they actually have to get the permit issued and respond to any problems that arise in the application process. Section 8, let's talk about this for just a second. This talks about the mobile vendor permit. Again, this expires on the date of the expiration that was written on the permit in any event, and this one I said every 6 months, just because of the different nature of what this does. Now, if the 6 months versus a year doesn't make sense, you folks tell me and we can change it. Doesn't matter. This was a starting place to begin with. Again, we talk about having 5 days. One of the questions that we need to talk about is whether or not, and we'll get to the point that we'll actually talk about, if there's restrictions on where the mobile food vendors can do what they're doing. It may be different if they're setting up a stand for tacos or something else, as opposed to somebody on a bicycle with a box, a cooler box that's going around the neighborhoods with ice cream. And the question that was posed for thought process is, are the permits going to allow them to work in residential areas with their attempts to sell for mobile food vendors?
I would wonder if we need to define the packaged food as compared to the served to eat on site. If that needs to be two different categories, because the Schwann's truck or whatever it might be, that's a whole different gamut than the taco truck that comes and sits in your parking lot or on your street, and everybody comes to get a taco at noon.
Mm-hmm.
I think that scenario shouldn't be allowed in the residential areas where I can park my taco truck and I can sell tacos outside the high school.
Okay.
I think that ought to be restricted to not in the residential
Non-residential, okay? Okay.
Because of the possibility of restriction of traffic flow? Is that what you're saying?
Well, our streets aren't, say a taco truck decides to sit on 6th Street and sell tacos over the lunch hour. You ain't gonna be able to drive by,
No.
True, yeah.
okay? In the first place, on one side, you can't even park.
I think our laws on our streets would prohibit the blocking of the flow of traffic or anything like that, wouldn't it?
It does, and there's provisions specifically in here that also prevents things like blocking sidewalks or entrances to parking areas and things like that.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, but as far as if there's an operation that's going to have some effect on the flow of traffic, maybe it's a secondary effect rather than literally blocking, but, so I can understand that that might be a concern. I guess that's a question on
I don't
whether
know
you
how
want to
you-
restrict that.
There's gotta be a way to distinguish between the Schwann's truck delivering ready-to-eat food,
Sure.
okay, that you prepare in your home, and the taco vendor that's gonna prepare food that,
Okay,
on the spot, you know.
yep, yep,
Because we've got, even Lamro Street, if you had a taco truck sitting on Lamro Street, and a car parked in front of their house on the other side, you're gonna have one-way traffic past that taco truck. And Lamro's not that narrow of a street, but if there's cars parked on both sides, you can't get two vehicles to meet on Lamro, so I don't think they should be in residential areas.
okay,
The food trucks that are serving food to eat on site, or however you would word that.
okay.
I don't know how you
Okay.
would.
Will you allow them in your parks?
In what, please?
In your parks? Where it wouldn't be restricting traffic?
That's a residential area. If they're in the parking lot, I don't know why. I think that's a whole
So
different category.
is that the key definition of where they park? If they're not parked along the street, it's okay in residential? Because what if they're parked in somebody's?
In
somebody
somebody's
has a huge
driveway.
Driveway, I don't know.
I-
don't have-
Those are all things to really consider, you know.
Okay, look at section 10, because this talks specifically on the issue that we're talking about right now. the
Yep, mobile food trucks, yep.
Mobile food vendor, where are the locations, restrictions, prohibitions, things like that. And then if we need to do some tweaking here, we can. The first one is basically saying where the vendor or the vehicle or equipment is blocking access to a public street, alley, bike path, etc., or access to an adjacent property. That's really not what you're talking about, though, is it?
I'm talking about trying to drive by it when there's a line of people standing there
Okay.
and cars parked.
You're really suggesting then that like you say, if somebody's selling packaged products to individual homes, they're okay, because that's
Correct,
prepackaged, because that's the Schwann's deal.
because they're not preparing it where they are.
We're not where they are, yep.
They're getting it out of their truck and
Yep.
hauling it to the front,
But on the
hauling
other,
it to the front door.
so let me ask you this then, Mr. Tram, so that I follow your thought process here. If you've got somebody that's doing the tacos on the location where they're going, if they are pulling in front of a residence, preparing the taco and delivering it to the house, because they had advertised they were doing tacos or Indian tacos or whatever that particular day, and we can bring it to your house, is that going to fall within the category you're thinking of or not?
Because while I'm thinking about all the Taco Tita trucks you drive by, whether it's T or Sioux Falls, they're not parked on the street. They're parked on
In parking
private
lots.
property, off the street, and maybe that's all we need to say, is that these food trucks aren't allowed to sell their wares from
The street.
the location of a city street. And that, to me, would solve my whole problem.
Okay,
Because, the truck is 6 feet wide, parked there, and then people are standing by it. And
Yep.
depending on what side of the street they park on.
yep,
But now that I think about it, I don't see, I see all kinds of them in the parking lots, or in the
I haven't seen a food truck in winter other than the carnival since
Yeah.
I've been alive.
Yeah, winter doesn't have them. I don't disagree with you,
We had a
but
fish
they are
one last
huge.
year.
They are
Fish
huge.
one last year.
There's one that sits at
Another
Platt.
one.
I
We've
think-
had maybe 3 or 4 in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't think of the food trucks when I'm thinking of that. This is specifically about mobile food vendor, but you have your dog groomer that has come to town, and at one time we discussed in code enforcement, should that individual be going home to home or in one public facility, finding a spot to set up? At that time, 3 years ago, I think we instructed, and the vendor has complied, they find a spot that they go to, a public spot, whether public or private, and set up there, and then people come to that.
Off the street.
Off the street.
Yeah.
Okay, good, and then.
So that would be the restriction that we want to look at, is not to park on the street.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and so we can work on some language to bring that in, to make sure that they're not parking and operating on, parking on a city street. Get off the street. But let's then compare to subparagraph B. Mobile food and beverage vending is prohibited in municipal-owned property, including parks, without the express consent of the city council. So if you've got,
So they'll have to plan ahead
well, they will,
if they're going to do an event, yeah.
they will, yep. But if you're gonna do an arts in the park and have mobile food vendors there, then the arts in the park facilitators could come to city council and request for that use of the park, including the mobile food vendors.
Is that something we should be involved with, Austin?
Well, we own, I mean,
The citizens own.
the citizens of Winter own the property.
Yep, okay. No, I meant the 6 city council members as opposed to one of the bureaucrats.
You're saying to approve
Yeah,
them?
to make them come to a city council meeting to, because we don't make them come to a city council meeting to get a permit. Only if they want to operate at Leahy Bowl.
Right.
Biggest thing would be for anyone who does it, and maybe we need to have this in the language, is that they sign off that they're not gonna hold the city liable if anything happens.
Right.
So if they're gonna be on our property, they need to not hold us liable if they get injured.
Under the city's facilities use agreements, like the folks that use the parks for organized events, they come to the city, they sign off on that. Provide us whether it's a waiver or insurance or
So
whatever.
if somebody wanted to do a fundraiser for the Blair person in the city park, they'd have to come to the city and get a permit to do that?
Currently, no.
They
Okay,
don't.
okay.
It's just our baseball fields that we require it at this point in time.
Right.
Say again?
It's just our baseball fields that we required on at this point in time.
So we have different rules at the ballparks than we do at the city park?
Correct.
Austin, that's
currently.
your deal.
Yeah, for instance, out at the city park on the west end, if somebody's going to use that for a wedding reception, they don't have to come see you.
They don't, current process is they typically call to see if there is a reservation policy. We do not do reservations, it's a first come, first serve. A couple years ago, we actually had 2 weddings on the same day in the same location.
Yep.
We don't wanna, I don't think, maybe you do, as council, do you wanna get into creating reservations
No.
for a
Yeah,
city
see,
park?
and that's what I wondered. I wondered the same thing
I
about.
do like what you're saying about having anyone who uses it for an event sign off that the city won't be liable if something happens, but you have birthday parties over there, you have a
Retirement.
retirement party over there yesterday.
An event is no different than Joe Blow taking their kids over there if the kid gets hurt. I mean, we're not gonna start making you sign into the city park every time you want
Right.
to take your kid over the merry-go-round. I mean,
Yeah.
Sure.
It's no different.
And that's what I'm getting at, is how far do we want to carry it?
Yep, right now that you don't have anything, and we did, last year we actually had someone who was injured at a birthday party and ultimately came after the city and our insurance.
And the other thing to think about is that what we're talking about here is a commercial use of the property, which is different than folks having their birthday parties or their anniversary parties on the
Okay.
parks. A classic example, we had somebody, not a mobile food vendor, but somebody with a mobile business last year that wanted to use the park in where she was using her business. She was basically told no.
She wanted to use our electricity.
Our electricity and our water.
Yep.
And she was told no, that it's a commercial venture, and that's not where you're gonna be setting that up. You're not gonna use the city parks for your commercial venture in that regard.
Local, non-local.
Gotta be so careful with that. Judy, what do you,
Oh, sure.
I don't have a problem with, you know, if they're off the street, if, you know, if they're self-sustained, they have their own little generator off, you know, like a food truck.
Like the food
generally
trucks do,
does. They
yeah.
got their own little water tank, and they're off the city street.
like in the parking lot by the bathrooms at the city park?
They happen to pull in and the people don't like them at the city park, don't go buy food from them. They won't come back next weekend.
This individual did want electricity from the city, didn't have a generator of their own.
Yeah,
But, I mean, that's part of doing business. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just didn't know if, whether it's council or the public at large wants to turn their park into a commercial
Yeah,
operation.
but no personal thing here, Jody, but how does that compare then to Jody Broadcasting Games where he's selling advertising at Leahy Bowl? Are we mixing and matching here?
It's a good question.
I-
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
It is fair, it is.
I know that if the radio station came up there, they would plug into our electricity to run their stuff.
Sure.
And we wouldn't say boo. Okay, in the same way as with Jody's service, and they are for-profit things.
Sure.
So I
Yes,
think we need to be
fair
a
point.
little aware of that when we start putting restrictions on food trucks or vendors, that kind of a thing. I like the idea that if it's for a nonprofit purpose, there's no fees whatsoever to use the park or things like that. But I do think that we ought to limit these food trucks where they prepare and serve the food
Yep.
from the truck to not be on city streets. Whether or not they're in a city parking
Yep.
lot, I really don't care.
Okay,
I mean, I don't know if we should care.
Exempt from when a street is being blocked off, so this will be your first question from the chamber. You have food trucks on Main Street for summer nights. So
That-
that would be exempt because.
But those people don't have to get, those people that serve on Main Street, do they have to get a permit?
They
When we
will.
have winter city nights?
yeah, but
You bet.
there's no traffic concerns. It's blocked.
Right, I agree. So I would think that would be because that's a special event, a Chamber of Commerce event, a nonprofit event,
Yep,
okay?
I just think that maybe we need to spell that out if the street is being blocked off for a special event purpose, then.
I think we're putting too much thought into it. I mean, we're talking.
Sorry.
West Third Street, not 41st and Kiwanis. I mean, we don't have a lot of traffic on our side streets.
Not gonna disagree with you.
Yeah.
But yet, when it happens, I'll be the first one that gets pissed. Okay? Or I'll be the first one that gets a phone call,
Yeah.
Sure.
okay? That I can't even get to my house. You know, somebody that lives on Sixth Street, can't get to my house. There's a food truck parked on the side of the street that you can't park on.
I'm totally fine that, like 20 minutes ago, I said, no streets. Can't park on the street unless, I mean, however you gotta word it for.
Yeah,
And I can handle that.
yeah, exempt Main Street during,
So look at the
Special
rest of
events.
section 10. You want section 10 to just be gone other than restrictions to say we're not gonna be operating out on the street? Is that all we need to say?
You already
Is
have it
it-
covered in D, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah,
in what?
D covers your special event on the Main Street.
correct.
Okay.
and B covers the other one in section 10. B and D provide us a lot of coverage.
Do you want city council to be the ones to approve, or do you want, as Brad calls them, bureaucrats to approve?
Actually, that's the people's part, and I think that's not our decision. I do, if you're gonna make an exception to let, the big one, Brad.
Yep,
would be-
go ahead.
Would be between McDonald's and Leahy Bowl during a state tournament. People like to set up in that park. It hasn't been a vendor, but that quite possibly could be in the future because we get so crowded on top.
Yep,
I don't think that is public works or park supervisors' ability to say that. If you leave this in here, you do have the authority then, if you want to, if they request, to grant
Okay.
them that. I still like you having that, because that has to come to a council, to
Okay.
the people's.
On a bigger event like that, people know they're coming plenty in advance.
Right.
I don't know if you can spell out somewhere in there that it's possible, a possibility upon request or something, and bring it to council.
but you know what? B really does say that.
It does.
All I wondered was putting them through the trouble of having to come to a Monday night city council meeting in advance.
You're probably talking, what, 2 or 3 times a year? that
Yeah,
somebody's gonna-
yeah, okay.
So it's probably not gonna be a huge.
So if you
deal.
leave it in there, yep. If they wanna go into a municipal-owned property, they gotta have permission.
So I think we're in agreement on B and D, probably stay.
That those would be the only two things in there, you mean?
What do you think about the residential areas? Open them up?
As long as they're
No.
not on the street.
So look at C.
I mean, it's pretty,
C only does different hours of operation.
From 8
That's
to,
all C does.
just closes them up earlier.
Correct.
I don't think they should be allowed in a residential area.
I think based on what we have enforced recently, whether it's one or multiple vendors, I don't.
Yep, because there's still a commercial
We
business.
talked about zoning, and it doesn't apply to a residential zone.
so as this little note up here, off of section 8.
You
Well,
have an
but that's a
individual
difference
asking about an
between-
ice cream truck right now.
Yeah, the Schwann's truck isn't a
Not
vendor,
Schwann's.
isn't a
Is
food
not,
vendor.
not covered by this.
Yeah, so that, yeah,
You
that,
have someone who wants to go around, like back in the 80s and 90s, and have popsicles and soft serve in a residential area.
Like, when I lived in Harrisburg, somebody did that.
Yeah.
To cruise around.
Sure.
So does that eliminate them, or? I mean, I don't really think they're hurting anything doing that, driving down the road.
Right now, this is not.
frozen foods, you mean? They delivered them to the door?
They
Oh,
want people to walk up to their window to buy it.
oh, at their food truck.
It's an ice cream truck where they would sell ice cream out the window to the kids who walk up to it.
Okay. Where we're at right now, we're in the process of not letting that, where our conversation is right now.
That's
So-
what I'm hearing.
It is what I'm hearing, yep. Okay,
Is there, I mean, I guess I'm not opposed to letting something like that happen. I mean, even if it, like we were using a taco truck, if it's not being parked, I mean, if they're just driving down the street, and they meet the requirements on the weight limit, and somebody runs out to the end of the driveway and buys an ice cream cone, I mean, is that big of a deal that we gotta say no to?
I know.
So there's a huge difference between a taco truck and an ice cream truck. Reason being is in a lot of those hot food items, if they're gonna move, they're gonna be required by a whole lot of other laws to have everything shut down. You'll have no hot grease, none of that. Versus an ice cream truck, you have a bunch of freezers. And it just goes with you and you don't have to shut them down as often. There is a difference between a hot food and a cold food.
and you're getting into an area here that the city is not going to
Right,
regulate.
I totally understand that.
You understand
but,
that?
yeah.
but I understand exactly what you're saying.
So you have a truck that pulls into a residential neighborhood, and how long do they sit there? They're there, what, 10 minutes?
10,
If-
15 minutes,
If
probably.
that, do you say it's allowed in a residential as long as it's mobile being considered the mobile vendor is moving off the block, I wouldn't say 15, 20 feet, but
Yeah.
to a different block within 15 minutes as an exception. I think the time and how long
Probably
they're
makes
sitting
sense.
there in that neighborhood and then moving to another neighborhood could be an
We have to
exemption.
get so goddamn.
I know it.
complicated. Yeah. But if we don't, then we're gonna have trouble.
It's either, if we don't put in that exception, we're saying hard line based on what
Yeah.
we've talked about today. It's
Yeah.
not happening.
Yeah.
Well,
And it's only 4 hours a week, you know.
right.
See how you can word it or something. I mean, I'm not gonna vote against somebody driving down the street selling ice cream cones.
I know. Maybe, yeah, I just don't know.
I'm not against like a stakeout mobile vendor cooking all their stuff in one spot and then it's all cooked, grease is put away, and then at 5 o'clock coming by my house because I'll utilize it for dinner. you know.
They wanna spill grease inside their own vehicle, so be it.
It's not gonna be my problem.
And I think the permission to park in the park is a good way to protect our people that rent our concession stands. You know, I mean,
'Cause we wouldn't want a
Absolutely.
taco
they've
truck.
had,
That's
you
a
know, I
good
mean,
point. It is.
They're doing business inside of a city park.
They are.
You know, shouldn't necessarily ever make something all exclusive, and you're the only person that can ever do it.
Right.
You're on city property doing business. A food truck comes in and asks for permission, they should be able to do.
From
Like
council.
when I took hot dogs and brats from the
Yeah,
Mid-Dakota and fed the T baseball team,
yeah.
okay? And then I took $40 and gave it to the operator of the concession stand, said I'd probably beat you out of this much money. So, yeah, that should be a permissible thing. Or get permission to operate in a city park if you're gonna sell it, if you're gonna have it for sale. Yeah.
To me, it sounds like a public hearing where the contractor at the city facility would be able to come in and say,
I
listen,
like that, advertise it as a public hearing since it's public property.
it would take a lot of foresight on any vendor.
On the vendor's part.
Yeah.
Yep.
To come into a
Yep.
state tournament
Yeah.
and set up. But it's a public hearing then. You can hear their application and then you could hear who we let the bid to come in and say, listen, I've put down a security deposit here, I've invested in staff, and this was an investment to do this all 16 weeks of the summer, not just this 3-day period.
Yep.
It's a public hearing, and then you as council can decide.
I can go for that, because I think about
Okay.
the big rodeos that we have, what's to stop a food truck from parking in the parking lot of the softball field
Yeah.
and beating the crap out of the concession stand people at the rodeo.
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, that should be
That is, that, when
I get it. Yeah, that makes good sense. We'll get that
express
drafted in there.
express consent granted by the city council is a public hearing. Is what that is.
Mhm.
And I like it.
I think that makes good sense. I do. Let's see. I think that's the main issues that we really needed to resolve, so we can get this finalized and ready to present to council next Monday. If you folks are okay with that, I'll rely on Chandra to help me finalize these couple issues that we've identified, and otherwise we'll go forward with that. I wanted to make our police department happy on 1055, because they had asked me some time ago, and then it fell off of my radar, what we call the Jake Break ordinance. The way our ordinance has been written was problematic, and it was not going to allow us to properly enforce the way most Jake Break ordinances are intended. This thing had some language in there that basically said, if the excessive noise is caused by some sort of a malfunction, something that's going wrong, then you can't be making that noise. Well, there's a lot of things out there that are covered by the Jake Break normal ordinance that are fully intended and are operating exactly what they were designed to do, and they're rattling windows. And so what I've done is stricken the language there under paragraph B that removes that because of an illegally modified or defective exhaust system except in an emergency. Strike that language, and then down here under paragraph C, just to clarify the language, the compression release engine brakes is also known as dynamic engine braking, which is the word.
And that's what our signs currently say,
That's what the
isn't it?
signs say, and
So
that's
now
what
we have to match that.
every
Yeah.
trucker knows, that's the signs you look for if you're a guy that likes to use a Jake brake. So that brings us back in line with that. Those two changes are going to give us enforceability that they wanted.
And then that engine braking will stop?
Yeah, kind of like speeding and stop sign.
You gotta remember, they've always used this because of noise.
Sure.
One of our trucks has quiet exhaust. You could have it on the whole way through town, nobody would even know. I mean, legitimately, it does not
The
make
braking?
any noise.
Well, that's what
But
people
then- But
want.
then some people got loud exhaust, and then when they flip them on, it's even louder.
Mm-hmm.
So it's-
My brother, he lives on the highway. He bitches at me all the time about the cops won't do anything about it. I said, you gotta
Right.
catch them, David.
Now you can tell them they'll have the tools to do it.
Yeah, that's why I asked, now there won't be any more?
Well, I can guarantee there'll be a few people around town celebrating if they hear that even one guy has been stopped and the situation has changed.
Yeah.
There are times that, because you can drive with your switch on. If a car pulls out in front of you, it's beneficial to be able to use them,
Sure.
going down the 4 lanes and something.
Because you stop really fast?
Yeah.
Is that what they do?
Yeah.
Yep. And if you're not making noise so nobody knows it, you're not going to get stopped for it.
No.
So are the two of you okay with taking that to ordinance
Yeah.
or to the council? All right. Last one, and this is kind of like what we started 3 weeks ago with that other ordinance. This is your take-home assignment, which is the cemetery chapter on ordinances. If you look on the second page, paragraph I, you see some language in yellow there. That's language that I have drafted based upon some of the situations that arose in our cemetery recently.
And we talked about this at our last,
We did,
either cemetery meeting or this meeting.
correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it was at the last cemetery meeting, I think that's right. This would rectify that particular problem. It allows, so if you've had, the family's had a funeral, they bring a bunch of funeral decorations to the grave for up to 2 weeks. They're okay to do that. The unfortunate event that happened earlier, I hope this would clarify it enough so that we know better. And I think it will. But
This
it
is-
really wasn't covered prior to this, and I think that's
You'll just be
what led us.
establishing guidelines for
Correct.
the operational supervisor and his staff and for
Correct.
our clients, customers.
Now, letter E, I thought we took care of that.
E?
Or we just do in our ordinance says we don't.
So I was just gonna ask you that, Paul. Does this include any of the other things that Brandy and I asked about?
Does not. And that's why I said this is our homework between now and then, because I know Troy and I have talked about that he and his crew have got a few things. I know that you and Brandy have a list, and I wanted to try to get all of that together
Yeah.
before we move this one forward, but this just starts the conversation today.
Yeah, because, just for council's information, Rich had come to both Brandy and I, because Brandy is your cemetery person in the office as far as selling lots and everything. There's a lot of different things throughout that we know they're doing, ordinance doesn't match that, or vice versa, ordinance says this, and maybe we're not doing, knowing that there's confusion in there. And so Rich and I had sat down couple different times and really gone through what other cemeteries are doing. And I had sent that off to Troy and Paul to review, to see if we wanted to add or delete or whatever. 'Cause the cemetery ordinance needs a major overhaul.
It does.
The cemetery needs a major overhaul.
It's coming.
My gracious. I've been spending some, now that you put me on that committee, we have graves that have sunk this much, okay? And so when our big lawnmower drives down in this part, we skinning all the grass off the high part. We seriously need to go out there with some topsoil, and one of them things that you see with the edges on them, the ground levelers, and we need to level that cemetery ground. That's why, I think that's why so many of our grave sites don't have grass on them, because we're cutting them off right at the nub. When we're down in this grave at the low point and our deck is up in front, I've been walking out there and it's a shame the way we're doing this, and all we ought to do is get some dumb dirt. Fill in the low spots, let it go, and plant some grass. And that one tree, that baby has no leaves on it, nothing. That baby is dead.
Okay.
Wow.
And we'll refer this information back to the cemetery committee. It's good information.
So I noticed on that E thing, it says that the city can straighten out the headstones
Correct.
and not charge the resident anything.
As long as they believe they can do it without damaging the headstone.
Yep.
If we damage the headstone, we're gonna be responsible.
So should we figure out, and this, I'm serious about
It
this,
says if we damage the headstone, we will not be held liable.
No, I understand that's what it says. I'm just telling you that
Every reasonable effort should be taken to provide care for.
but you can
And
spray
that's gonna
that
be the
foam in
key.
there now to raise your sidewalk. Could we maybe figure out how our city employees could learn to do that? You don't have to dig anything except a hole underneath it. Spray foam it just like you do, like Blackstone does, or Blackburn does, and maybe have one city employee that knows how to administer that. That might be worth, because we have a lot of them that are tipped over, not necessarily straight.
I'd like to point out your last page that you gave us in our packet.
Oh, I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
I
thought
really
that-
did remember to bring it for a reason.
Okay,
And
Not to-
like I say, no, that's all right, because this is not intended to move forward to council with this ordinance
Okay.
right now. This
Okay.
is over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be hoping to get Troy and his folks and Chandra and her office together with me so that we can agree on a rewrite of this thing. But I wanted you folks to have the opportunity to look at it, bring your ideas back as well. The last thing that's on here is just a sample for you, for your information, because I've had people call me and tell me, and I've had a few city officials have told me that our ordinance is improper and illegal because it's conflicting with state law. Well, I just wanted to bring it to you so you can see what it says. What it really says, to paraphrase very accurately, is that in addition to state-identified noxious weeds, we as a local community have declared a few other things noxious weeds, and they're all noxious weeds within the city of Winter. And that includes dandelions and creeping jenny, which are not on the state's list, but they are here in the city of Winter.
But we already have this ordinance?
We do. That is current ordinance. I did not intend to bring it from the standpoint of trying to change it.
Okay,
I wanted to use it so that anybody that is concerned about whether it's accurate, there's what it says. It does not conflict with state law. It adds to, which we can do. If, for instance, if it came here and said, here are a list of things that we declare in Winter, South Dakota are not noxious weeds, and it included on that list things that the state said are, we couldn't do that.
yep, I got it. So someplace else, there's a place that says the state's noxious weeds. This is just our local ones.
Correct.
Okay, and this is already an ordinance.
It is.
So we don't have to do anything except know it.
Exactly right.
That's
It's
the easy part.
just for your information.
Why couldn't all our stuff be this?
Gotta give you something to do, Brad.
That's right, that's right. Now, I want you to notice, it's 4 minutes till. We made it. Thanks for your input. Good discussion here today.